this Bone Spear build is not really for the average player. This uses 2 Uber Uniques, Shakos and Starless, and a perfect 1-second Sacrilegious Soul. This build also is as close to as perfect as I could possibly get it, specifically like these gloves and this beautiful amulet, near perfect lidless wall, as well as a pretty bang up chest piece. And here are my boots. Just your average boots. If I were to do this again, I would actually get the +3 evade boots instead of the attacks reduced, but they're really expensive right now. And then our splintering weapon, which I don't know if I have a perfect splintering. I do not. Okay. The key factors of this build are the techniques with Starless Skies and Maxroll, as it actually just removes us having to worry about our corpse skills entirely and focus more on shooting our spears, in which our spear actually drops to 11 essence per, which means we lose about 5.5 times damage each spear, which is really, really good. And then we also base a lot of our abilities off of Lucky Hit, and this does not give you the excuse to stack Lucky Hit. What it does is it gives us the ability to sustain with Lucky Hit, as Bone Spear has a baseline of 50% Lucky Hit. And so I'm going to pop up 2 formulas on screen. We have the spell Lucky Hit chance, which is what is shown on the tooltip here, right under Essence Cost. And then we have the item effect Lucky Hit chance, which is what is the trigger rate for the actual effect. And you can also do this with like Abhorrent Decrepify for Pentadot or Infinimus. And so Lucky Hit for us really kind of stems exclusively from Bone Spear, although we do have a pretty high Bone Storm Lucky Hit chance. And a lot of our Lucky Hit comes from our wand, first and foremost, which we don't even really use it for, as we only use wand for attack speed, and our 2 unique rings. That is it. Nothing else. And in fact, I can just pop these bad boys on, which is Exposed Flesh plus Conceited, and you'll find that we do quite a bit of damage with them. But we do have issues sustaining because we're not hitting a vulnerable target now. There we go. So now we're able to sustain pretty easily, and we're doing pretty high damage. And there we go. But I really enjoy this setup where we're just not having to worry about it. And it's pretty good. So overall, that's for Lucky Hit, and how we can calculate that here is let's just look at the glove effect and our lidless wall effect, which sum together. So the 20.3% and the 21% total 41.3% for me, at least. And then it procs at a 5% chance. Now, that does not mean that out of 100, it's a math equation of multiplicative towards this number in our Bone Spear, so at 66%. So we take 5% times 66%, and that gives us a 3.3% chance to actually trigger on hit. So it's Lucky Hit, and this is why in Season 1, Barber was trash. For us, at least. Mainly because it ate all of our Lucky Hit by comparison, because if we actually look, each one of these hits would count at some point in time. So it's almost a given that it would actually trigger. So Exposed Flesh is double that, so it's 10%, so it's a 6.6% chance to trigger for 50. And then Shakos gives us 8.5% resource generation, or 18.5%, which gives us even extra essence regen. So we get half of a essence per second, And we also get quite a bit from our Tybalts. So it's a flat 50. So it's 18.5 times 50, which is like just under 60% or 60 essence. And then the big one is the 5% chance to restore 21% of our primary resource, which at 174 is just under, if I did it, it's like 80 essence, something like 84. 85. It gives us 85 essence per tick, essentially. And we can confirm this by using Metamorph, as Metamorph does not necessarily report that it has a lucky hit value. So if we look at Metamorph here, it doesn't say if it has a lucky hit value. So you're like, okay, well, it probably doesn't have a lucky hit value. But I want to tell you right now, it definitely does. In fact, we confirmed it has about 100% chance to have a lucky hit trigger, which is double Bone Spear. So that means that this is actually a true 5% quotation, because we also have other things. And then we also have like 10% from Exposed. It is at its face value on Metamorph, so it procs quite often, as you can tell. So overall, that's lucky hit and how we kind of abuse it. I would not really worry about lucky hit on any other item. As you can tell, it doesn't really matter. As for aspects, we have Serration on our neck piece, and this is specifically for a higher initial spear damage. So if we drop it down to single, and we hit that with an actual crit, please. 700k crit. That's pretty good. And we run Ghostwalkers on boots, and this is specifically the interaction between Tybalt's Will and Metamorph. So we have more movement speed net than with Wind Strikers, although if you have a higher value Wind Striker, that is actually a little bit more consistent. So gems, we run skulls in our jewelry, and we run ruby in our armors, and then we have emerald in weapon. We are at 70 all res with 11,100 armor. You can get more armor, but I'm not too worried about it, and if I were to get armor, I would replace Tybalt's Will with a full rare pant damage configuration with either Disobedience or Might. I am leaning more towards Might. It is what it is. Especially since we can get the Iron Barb flask. That gives us like 1,400 armor. And then our Book of the Dead, we're running our standard Skirmisher Cold Iron. Do not run Shadow. The 15 essence is actually not that big of a deal, especially since they nerfed Ossified Essence by 50%. So this is actually like a 7.5 times damage increase with one spear addition. So it's not that big of a deal, versus a strict 1.5 times damage to vulnerable enemies. It's not 15% times more vulnerable stat, it's times damage to vulnerable enemies. And then same thing with Iron Golem here. We have 1.3 times increased critical strike damage. Skill tree, we do 1 point splinters, 1 point in enhanced bone splinters. We get our Bone Spear setup with Paranormal. I would definitely run Paranormal over Supernatural. We get our 9 points here for Perfectly Balanced and Hued Flesh, as well as Unlimiting Energy. We get Ghastly Blood Mist specifically for suppressors. This is how we deal suppressors, because we can just walk in, drop our corpse, Sack Soul triggers it, and then we just blast, like in melee range. Okay. As for here, we can run Death's Embrace for damage reduction, or you can run Death's Reach for more damage, so it's not that big of a deal. It's 12% times more damage. So you're doing like maybe 150k, 100k more ish per spear. But I like the damage reduction. 1 point in tendrils, and then we get plague tendrils for a little bit of a vulnerable value, just in case we can't spear something or metamorph, like in the tendril or in the suppressor example. This would apply automatically vulnerable without us having to metamorph at all, but you can run blood orbs if you're finding that it's kind of repetitious. And you can get a little bit more healing if you absolutely need it. Here we're going to get the entire bone cluster, including a full rapid ossification for a hair amount more cooldown reduction on Bone Storm, although it really shouldn't matter with Lidless Wall, so you can actually drop these and get Death Reach. But I like this just in case. We're going to get full Memento Mori and Standalone, as well as Inspiring Leader, and Bone Storm, and Ossified Essence. So let's talk attack speed real quick. This build specifically leverages attack speed as a damage multiplier, so you'll see that our damage actually doesn't do a whole lot, right? So we're at 600k, 900k there, not bad. So I'm going to try to show you my attack speed bonus here. So we're at 87%, and then we're going to, there we go. So keep an eye on it. It moves, so 87, 87. So at almost 90%, it's pretty damn good. And that's because we are leveraging attack speed with Ravenous. Where's Ravenous? Yeah. Ravenous, we get 40% of our total movement speed pool at a 20% lucky hit rate. So just like our lucky hit, we get 20% chance, so it's double exposed flesh, so it's about 10% chance to just get 40% of our total movement speed pool, which currently yields 47.5. So if I dash, we're up to 55.1. And I'm pretty sure I have boots that have more movement speed than what I have right now. Pretty sure. Either that or I sold them. Alright. It's fine. So if I just dash now, because we're leveraging Tybalt's Will, we're up to 95.3. Go away, Ajax. So attack speed is actually just a strict damage multiplier. So as you can see, we're just ripping, and you can certainly feel it. So we can do something like 4 to 5 bone spears at our max per second. So 4 to 5 times 1.5 to 1 to 3 point something million, like 3.4. We're doing upwards of 10 million to 30 million DPS, because we also have to factor in our 5 splinters. So if we stand further back, there we go. You know, each splinter is doing about 500k. So 5 times 5, that's 2.5 million times 5, that's just over 12 million, then times per second, or the initial spear per second. So yeah, we're over 20 million DPS, 30 million with this setup. And that's the entire key point of this build, is that it's very strong and very fast. And you can see that with the fact that I did a 7.6 second Duriel at the start of this video, as it's just that good. Paragon. This is way different than my standard Paragon. The starting board and bone graph are kind of similar. Why are you there? Let's get more armor. So we just tackle this life node here, or this life cluster. We get some all res, which I don't even know if I need. So 70%. I probably need the rare, yeah. Alright. So we're going to get the life node, so we spend like, I don't know, 10 points to get that for like an extra 2k life. And then we set up for our AOZ. Now this is the pre-AOZ board. So we would move Essence all the way up here, and we would get all of the dex nodes, and then we would get every single +5 core stat in range. And I'll show you the planner I have in Maxroll that actually has the value or the actual glyph in their planner so that you can actually see it. But overall, everything else is standard 5 glyph board. We're running Corporeal, Essence, Exploit, Gravekeeper, and Sacrificial, and then we'll drop Sacrificial for Essence and Corporeal for Tears of Blood. Right, that should be everything, so let's go to the planner. Okay. Right, so planner, let's go to Paragon. As you can see, this is the final setup. And I say if core stat is equal to all stat, whatever. Right, so we're going to get Essence, which would, give us 22% times damage is kind of required. And then our Tears of Blood. Now, something I notice here is that they actually have it scaling on the first bullet point. Now, this glyph, Maxroll probably has this wrong, but I highly doubt that at level 200 it's going to do 81.6 times damage per 5. I think they messed this up. I think they're just kind of doing a broad range assumption that this means the same thing. The reason why I say this is because if we look at our all damage here, this is ridiculous. This is not, no. This is no. Absolutely not. So what I think they need to do, they need to drop this back down to 2, and it's actually the second bullet point that yields 250. So in actuality, so this would actually be like 4x damage at the max, I believe, if that. So our 1 million hits would turn into 4 million hits. But as you can see here, we're snipping off the bloodbath, and we're dumping all of our points into here. As 5 points on our Tears of Blood would yield the same value as like a corporeal multiplier. We're running the normal exploit, and yeah, that's pretty much it for Paragon. And something that you could do is run a sword. So I did some testing here, and I didn't really like it, but you could run sword. I don't know why there's no modifier. Oh, okay, Maxroll. And you're not loading, so let's refresh just in case. That's weird. Oh, Maxroll, you're not doing hot, are you? Alright, well, so it's all stats and crit damage and core damage, just your box standard. But something I found is that I really like the lucky hit and faster attack speed. And then over here in the bottom right, we have different setups here. So if you want to run the normal setup but with tanky pants, for some reason Maxroll is just having a gaff of a moment, but this would be like armor, life, damage reduction, and damage reduction from either close, distant, or while fortified. And we're running might instead of like disobedience just for 20% damage reduction. You could technically run disobedience as well. And then we have our starless list run, which is, let's say you also want to drop Tybalt's, but you could run Tybalt's with it, it doesn't really matter. But we have conceded, exposed, with Cerational Amulet, and this would be like our damage spec, quote unquote. Don't worry about this being red. It just doesn't recognize that Shaco's is equipped for some reason. And there we go. That's the build. We can run a Lilith Let me just make sure she's reset. Okay. Come on. And I can show you guys how I do Lilith and how this build actually performs in its tank variant. I do have the 7.6 second Durio kill with the old Paragon setup, but with the new gear. But this is with the new Paragon and new gear. I just don't have any Durio runs because, well, I'm not buying 16 million gold worth of mats just for one run. Come on. Today. Alright. So, just walk in here, activate this cursor, stand a little far back, and then just pump her and she'll be pretty dead. There you go. This build is pretty bonkers. As far as damage, in the current meta. Okay, I want to get away from corpses here so I can solve it. So, generally speaking, I would say this build would be very much AOZ viable. And in fact, I would put it probably one of the best builds for soloing AOZ in general. Okay, and then just kill her. Oh, that was kind of messy. I was a little too far back there. Okay. By the way, if you didn't know, for Lilith, it's always top, right, left, center. Okay. And you have a lot of time. Don't worry about this. Just because it's shaking doesn't mean anything. And then I stand on this right corner and just shoot in the center. And there you go. So overall, this build is definitely going to be the best build for soloing AOZ. And with a level 200 tiers, I could definitely see us clearing at least T25 AOZ Nightmare Dungeons.